Oh no, you did because I did. Let's speak. Babu Bhai. Doctor, you are taking some? Yeah, he's here.
This.
Okay. Can you represent? Ah, okay. Good to know. I'm from IGES.
Oh, yes.
And I'm also in charge of climate change.
Okay. I was just busy. Yeah, she was mentioning about you.
She was in my position.
Yeah.
She's at home now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also a
And then organizing this one. Oh my gosh. She said you are in good hands. I know. Because the Korea was the previous supporter, so we work with the Sohei, so I know how much work load you have. Super great.
What I see. Just a moment, please. I will.
A very good morning, colleagues. May I request everyone to please remain seated? We will be starting soon. Thank you, everyone. A very good morning to all of you. As someone from Nepal myself, for those who are celebrating, I would like to extend my warm wishes for a very happy Vijaya Dashami or Dashera, as we call it in Hindi. We also extend our heartfelt thoughts to our colleagues and participants who are from the Philippines, hoping that you and your loved ones are safe and supported as well following the recent earthquake. We will now start our session on the global goal and adaptation, measuring what matters. We will be talking about the operational challenges as well as what it means when it comes to the implementation of the indicators and targets. So with that, I would like to now hand over to Nambi Apudarai to begin the session. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Apan for having me here, and it is my privilege to moderate this session on a very important topic on measuring what matters in advancing global goal and adaptation, framework to implementation. As you all know, adaptation is a very challenging one because it is not like adaptation actions are not linear, like what you see in mitigation actions, They are very much embedded because the problem is it is very much embedded and entrenched in the development processes and practices. So the multidimensional and multi-sectoral and the place-based sort of, endowments of adaptation makes it difficult to sort of, to attribute even, let alone measure. So the complexities won't allow us to construct any standardized metrics. But what gets measured gets managed well. So also in the adaptation context, getting sort of getting it approximately right is better than precisely being wrong because it might lead to maladaptation. Many times you've seen that. So over the past decade, at the same time, we have seen several successful incremental adaptation stories, particularly from this region. Is very rich, and the knowledge and the repository of knowledge which is there has to be harnessed if you really want to bring some transformational change. So, there are several examples from this part of the world. And, GGA provides a good framework. GGA, as you all know, it's conceived and established under the Paris Agreement and assumes enormous significance of taking the adaptation to the next level from incremental to transformation. That's at least the implied sort of a knowledge what we have. And GGA provides a framework and targets for measuring progress and adaptation, and is expected to guide global adaptation efforts by highlighting where and how adaptation plans and policies are being implemented, and where it worked, where it isn't. So these kind of questions are lingering. So it sort of provides some answers to that. And the attention is now turning to translating the agreed framework targets and indicators into actionable pathways for countries. And this COP assumes a lot of significance because the parties are going to negotiate on the indicators. Out of 1,000-odd indicators, they're narrowing down to about 100 now. Again, hopefully there'll be some consensus on that. The problem now in hand is to sort of operationalize GGA. So it has lots of other issues. Like I'm reminded of Yusuf's comments yesterday, talking about bringing a systems perspective for transformational adaptation. when you talk about systems, it's about the agencies, as you mentioned, actors, and processes that matter. And that is why we have brought together a bunch of people, who are well established in their own rights, from governments, the representatives from governments, from civil society, and IPCC, the scientific body, and UN as well, from UNEP. So it's a good mix of people, and hopefully we could find the answers, at least some pointers for this problem, and see how it takes us. With this background, I would like to introduce our lead speaker, or who is providing the sort of a framing for this whole discussions, Teresa Wong. She's the head of science of the IPCC Working Group 2 Technical Support Unit. She'll set the tone. She has worked in the adaptation space for more than 10 years, and she had stints with FAO, UNDP before taking up this IPCC role. And she has served in North America and Middle East regions. And it's a very rich experience, and she brings the scientific perspective. Over to you, Teresa.
Thank you so much for having me in this session. And thank you, Nambi, for the introduction. I am from the IPCC Technical Support Unit for Working Group 2, serving the 7th assessment and getting it off the ground, and also looking for all your support. We are based in Singapore, so please count us as one of your regional partners. But today, I'm not really wearing the hat of IPCC so much. I'm actually maybe giving this presentation on the GGA from the perspective of someone who has been working on the UAE Belém work program on developing indicators for the GGA. So I think I just want to maybe set the scene for this very rich conversation, which I'm also really looking forward to. So I think just to remind ourselves, and it's also 9 a.m. on day 100th of this meeting, that we are here because we're not doing indicators, in a vacuum, right? Because we, as an adaptation community, as Nambi said, has come to a point where we need to solidify a couple of ways of measuring progress of whether our actions are leading to reducing climate risk, reducing vulnerability, and all the things that we value as an adaptation community. And I think the IPCC 6th assessment, which is our latest assessment, also has said that countries have been responding, sectors have been responding, but there's still not much evidence on, how much this has been effective. Have these mostly been incremental? Have they been transformational? All these questions about effectiveness. And also, I think a lot of indicators are being used. You'll be surprised out there if you ask people, have you been using indicators to measure adaptation progress? There's actually a lot out there, but also the IPCC in Chapter 17 has said that we do not have this globally applicable set of all-purpose standard indicators where we could be our starting point for measuring progress, between and amongst countries on adaptation. So I think situating ourselves here, why the GGA has been trying to work on indicators is because of the importance of these for measuring our progress. Also part of the monitoring, evaluation, and learning process, which is an important part of the adaptation process and all the people who work on NAPs. Where this is a process that depends on a systematic way of collecting, analyzing, and using information, but it's also very context-specific, right? So these are the kinds of things that we have to balance. While we have maybe a globally agreed set of indicators, this has to be contextualized within what the country needs, the vision of the country or the party in terms of why we're reporting on adaptation, which leads to this whole cycle that forms the MNE process. Also a reminder that these indicators are situated in a process that many of us have agreed should be continuous, should be iterative, and should not just be a one-off. So I think we, as the group of experts, and we've seen this line, right, in the Article 7 of the Paris Agreement, where the goal on adaptation, the global goal is to do these three things. And we've taken this language rather seriously in the group of experts: enhancing adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing vulnerability to climate change. Okay. So I think instead of trying to give you a little bit of a timeline of the work of the indicator experts. So my view is very partial. It's just from someone who's maybe been working intensely on this with a group of other 77 experts which have been selected across the globe, representing different geographic regions and representing different subject matters and themes, and trying to sort of build that story of how we have come to, like Nambi says, the set of 100 that is being discussed in the next couple of weeks. So I think CMA 5, which is I think in COP28, has sort of, in the adoption of the UAE framework for global climate resilience, has given us the framework for these indicators, which are these 7 thematic targets and 4 dimensional targets. So if you're hearing a lot of language about the 9A or the 9E targets or the 10C or the 10D, this is where we get it from. So I think this is the exact sort of text, decision text, and you'll see under the paragraph 9, it's divided into from A to G, and they cover thematic areas. I think people who might have been at the COP28 negotiations have seen how this was also, came up during the negotiations and became the final text of the decision. 9A covering water, 9B covering food and agriculture, 9C covering health, D covering ecosystems and biodiversity, E on infrastructure and human settlements, F poverty, eradication, and livelihoods, G cultural heritage. So I think a lot of you have been also looking at the indicators, and you've also gone maybe straight to some of the sectors that you have been interested in. So I think this is what we allude to when we talk about the 7 thematic areas. There's also indicators that have been formulated for these things we call the 4 sort of dimensions, which is the sort of the recognition of the parts of the adaptation cycle that are also important to track. Whether countries have conducted vulnerability and risk assessments, whether they have planning instruments that are participatory, gender responsive, and transparent, the NAPs, etc. Whether parties have been implementing their national adaptation plans, and D, whether they have monitoring, evaluation, and learning frameworks. So this is sort of what the experts were divided into these groups in terms of your sort of thematic and subject expertise. But we work together very much also as a group in very large virtual meetings throughout this whole year. So this sort of kicks off the UAE BLM work program, which is really focused on indicators. Even though it was starting from 2023 and it's supposed to end in 2025 at COP30, but I think the experts were really only convened in around August of 2024. I think we actually also begin from a place of building on what has been out there. So there was a call by the UNFCCC Secretariat for submissions of parties and observers for indicators that already exist. So there were 64 submissions, and the indicators were harvested from these submissions, and they led to 9,000 adaptation indicators. So just wrap your head around this. No, we actually have lots of indicators. What's the quality of the indicators like? What do they look like? Are they really adaptation indicators? Do they track resilience, adaptive capacity? What are these? So I think that was our starting point for the group, is to make sense of this 9,000 indicators. So a very sort of complicated timeline with many boxes here, not expecting everyone to read this. Was the source of this was Timo Leiter, who's one of the sort of organic leaders of this expert group, who wrote this, and I think in a policy brief, showing firstly that this was not a straightforward process, right? It had a lot of political milestones. It wasn't that when the experts were convened in August of 2024, we were set a task and everybody just did it and produced something. There were a series of negotiations. We had a couple of milestones where the first part of this was to do a stock take or a scan of the indicators, report back to parties, saying what we saw of this set. What was some of the potential gaps. And then we had also additional criteria that would come in at COP29 or SB 62, also adding more dimensions to the work of the experts, going, all right, we also have to think about measurability, availability. We need to stratify or think about disaggregation along certain lines. So we had additional criteria that came during this process. And I think so the first step for us was to try to understand the indicators that were grouped according to the targets. I think each target group, for example, food and agriculture, we sort of mapped what were the main adaptation areas within the food and agriculture target. And we also looked very much at the language of 9B, for example. It was to strengthen climate resilient practices, regenerative production, sustainable production, but also food security, access, and nutrition. So we wanted to make sure that the indicators that were picked, in the end, responded to also the target language. And I think that was also then, the steps that we kind of agreed on, and each group went off and sort of did this to map, these out of these 9,000 indicators, which of these corresponded to these kinds of themes in the target. Was this a food security one? Was this a production indicator? And then also, I think the biggest step was to identify the gaps and develop new indicators. One of the things, and I'll have another session with FAO in the coming at 11 o'clock, where I will talk a lot more about the food and agriculture indicators. And one of the things that we found when we did this big scan was that we found that a very large proportion of the indicators that were submitted were on production. Like, even if you recognize that the food system needs to also acknowledge the importance of other value chain actors, supply and distribution of food, as also adaptation areas. Most of the parties had submitted these indicators. We could see from this set it was very largely on production. It was a lot of adaptation actions in this set of indicators, etc. So there were some gaps, and I think the part of it was to go, do we also want to plug some of these gaps? But also, I think the gaps are also informative because they also tell us what sorts of things are actually really not that easy to measure, and that's why maybe people have not been measuring them. I think some, different groups had slightly different approaches. In the food and agriculture, this is a very understanding that this is such an exposed sector to climate change. We sort of came up with a framework where we made sure that we also established and understood the kinds of climate hazards and drivers and impacts on agriculture that then called for certain adaptation actions to address these risks, and then mapping what sorts of outcomes that we want from these adaptation actions, and then sort of hoping that this also feedback to addressing these hazards and drivers and how they impacted the sector. So I think for example, for our group, it was important to have this pathway. We don't call it impact pathway now in the global stage. We call this result areas because I think there is a little, some appetite for not having a pathway kind of the deterministic framework. I think that some parties are not so keen to hear about. So I think, just coming to where we were, the boxes actually should be shifted over to SB62, because by SB62 we came up with what we thought was more of like a long list or a short list of indicators. Each group decided to then bring, there are thousands of indicators down to a meaningful set of indicators, taking also in consideration the criteria that had been given at that time, measurable, availability of data. That was actually, when we were discussing at SB62, there was definitely quite a lot of differences between target groups. There were some groups, for example, like water, which actually put a lot of indicators in that had already been in other data sets that were already being measured. And there were other groups that had more sort of ambitiously modifying indicators to reflect adaptation. So there have been discussions, for example, and I think our panelists would talk more about this, on making sure that countries don't have an additional burden of collecting data that isn't there, that they don't have methodologies for collection. So I think that there were all these considerations, and so a lot of the groups tried to use existing indicators with slight modifications. Other groups took it more seriously and going, here are some DRR Sendai ones that we have already have, and why don't we just use them? But the critical thing at SB62 was that I don't know whether you call this a consensus. I'm not a negotiator, but there was, a sort of a sentiment that we should try to be a bit ambitious on adaptation. Obviously, we have so many indicators that are being tracked by the SDGs and all that. Many of them might not be exactly adaptation relevant. So we want to make this GGA set adaptation relevant. So that was the ambition there, which also leads to, I think, some methodological work down the line. And I think that's sort of the tension when you come up with these indicators. And I think by mid-September, we had come up with 100 indicators. Now I think I'll show, sorry, just this one. So I think just to give a sense of how we started and where we are, we went from 9,500 to 100, and you'll see the sort of division. This is in the report that you can find online on UNFCCC website of the spread of indicators amongst the thematic groups and also the dimensional indicators. What we also did, and I think this is crucial to say, towards the last couple of months of the process, we also tried to do cross-target indicators. Just to take the food and agriculture example, water is a very important part of food and agriculture adaptation, but we also talked to the food group to make sure that they had indicators on water stress, water use efficiency, so that those were covered in that target area, and we don't have to add additional indicators to ours. We made sure to talk to the poverty and livelihoods group to make sure that the things that we valued in social protection for smallholders, etc., were also articulated under indicators in poverty eradication livelihoods. Ecosystems and biodiversity was also an important group because there were all these, healthy ecosystems that undergird, certain agricultural systems as well. So we wanted to make sure that and I think the whole group also converged on bringing the finance capacity, institutional capacity indicators under the 10A to 10D group. So you'll find most of the finance indicators there and the capacity building indicators. So I think there was some agreements on making some of these consistencies. So just trundling towards the end, I think this is where the panel, I think, will answer all the questions that we need to be answered. This is open for review, so you can also look at the data set, you can look at the Excel file, you can look at the report. Tomorrow and Friday, there will be a discussion in Bonn amongst parties of these 100 potential indicators. So there will be changes, this is not set in stone for sure. I think there will be changes, there will be discussion on what kinds of indicators to go in there, should take some types of indicators out or shift them around. I'm not even sure what might happen in the next 2 days. So as Nambi was pointing out, the decision on these indicators are expected to be adopted, if not in Belém, maybe in the coming SBs. And I think the expectation is that these are, of course, voluntary indicators. These are global indicators, and parties might want to use them to report via instruments like the BTRs, adaptation communications, and also contributing to the global stocktake. I just want to show this. I think I've gone maybe a minute over time, so I don't want to finish too late. But I think there's a lot more of work ahead. This is only the beginning. It's not the end, unfortunately. I think this is where people in the room and our esteemed panel is going to help us with this work, right? Further work on metadata, methodologies, bringing this together with national statistical offices and alignment with other kinds of reporting metrics that needs to be done. Refinement of maybe the disaggregation types. We had forgot to show you the conditions, I think, just to show you the sort of criteria. Sorry to jump back to this, but all the criteria that we had received from parties showing what they want to see in terms of disaggregation and contextualization. When you look at an indicator, it seems like very general, and I think the purpose of that generality is so that it can be applied to as many countries or parties as possible, with these possibilities of disaggregating or contextualizing in terms of ecosystems or communities, etc. So I think I also want to think about this positively. I think for sectors, this is a really nice opportunity to see some of the adaptation areas mapped out. This could be a really great forum for discussion. This could be built into your NAP processes, coordination processes, and also maybe offers capacity building opportunities. So thank you. Thank you for listening, but also wanting to thank the people who are part of this. It's not just the experts who did it. We received a lot of comments from international organizations who also published things to say what they wanted to see in food and agriculture, for example, and other thematic areas, and who also helped to finance some travel and offer spaces to convene. So that's all I have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for walking us through the nuts and bolts of the process. It's mind-boggling. Harmonizing the indicators in itself is a challenge, and then fitting it to the national context is even a bigger challenge. So now we have a very eminent set of panelists and who could reflect from the national perspective what is doable, what is not, from their own experiences at the national level. Because each country has its own circumstances, so it's not easy to sort of imbibe this and roll it out. So I intend to divide the discussions into two segments. One, looking at the institutional arrangements and capacities in place to implement and report on GGA across different countries' contexts. And the other segment is about exploring alignments and integration, because we need not reinvent the wheel. It's important to sort of see how do you leverage the existing sort of platforms and processes that are in the country level. So that is another way of looking at things. So now I turn on to Mr. Sonam Tashi from Bhutan, who is the Director, Department of Environment and Climate Change, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, Bhutan. He's serving as a key member of several delegations associated with different COPs. And he's been a very seasoned sort of a bureaucrat working within the Bhutanese system. So my question to you, Mr. Sonam, is what institutional and technical capacities are needed for countries to effectively implement the GGA targets and indicators? How is your country, how is Bhutan placed in this context? If you could reflect a little bit from your experience, it would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nambi. I also want to thank Teresa for the summary. And for those who have not read, I would urge, I think Teresa has mentioned also the technical report, right? It's a very good report. It actually, it helps explain the complexities of this whole GG indicator and all that. And again, I just want to just set some context. I think just again, want to thank Teresa and the group of 77 or 78, or was it 98? I don't remember these numbers also now. Experts who've really brought down a few thousands of indicators. Now it's up to us to really get going on those 100 indicators and all. And I mean, we're having discussions with groups, regions, and it's interesting discussions, which I think we'll know in Belgium. But from what we're seeing right now, as a party representative and someone with this mandate on climate and environment, we are kind of really happy and just want to thank Teresa. And I see a few others here in the room for the effort really made in bringing this bringing it down to 100 indicators and all. And actually, I don't know, it's pretty good, except for there are certain sections, and we all know that, to do with the MOI, which needs a lot of discussions on. But in terms of the institutional capacities and all, I think this is something which, Nambi, I just want to reflect on what you were mentioning at the beginning, where you're saying that unlike, say, mitigation, right? And for the longest time, I've been in the mitigation, I've been in the market side, I've been moving on to the adaptation also, is that the multidimensional aspect of adaptation, and then that really being country specific and all. I think these are very important when you design these institutional frameworks. And when we talk about institutional frameworks and capacities and all, a concern that, for instance, when we were discussing the GG indicators to our government, presenting that why we need to be active in these negotiations and all, and the importance of this, the question that they're saying, okay, this is very good, but the key question that our planning, say, agencies and the cabinet will always ask is, what is the burden of reporting, and and does it really make a difference, right? That and it entails cost and also. This is something which we really have to address. And for this, and while we understand, and I think the experts have pointed out, and from all the technical papers prepared by the secretariat and experts and all, it really points a lot to that we need strong institutional arrangements for GG implementation, and what they call vertical coordination across, the national level or the federal or the central level, then local levels, and so on, and also within government agencies and all. And this is something which, see, from my country's experience, we have the National Environment Commission. It has representatives from across different government agencies and all, and that is is that oversees, say, let me put it for simplicity, that oversees the climate and environment mandate of the country. But again, what is interesting is when it comes to, say, in specific to adaptation, recently we've had the auditors on climate performance pointing out to us that while you have these institutional arrangements in place at a national and local level, but what they're seeing is when it comes to specific, say, technical aspects of, say, adaptation or monitoring and evaluation and all, what the auditors were pointing out is that that it seems to be project based, activity based, and the moment a project or activity, like, and let me give it as an example, an activity could be like dealing with glacial lake outburst in the Himalayas, in the high mountains. Once that project of stabilizing the lakes is done, then it seems the adaptation ends over there. So this again, this is something which we are trying to deal with. We are trying to work on, can we have a national level adaptation monitoring and evaluation system, which again, if I heard Teresa correctly, she was mentioning about, MEL and so on. And so these are things which we're looking into, because to really move beyond, GG is a bold new way of doing things. But again, that doesn't mean that we create a lot of new setups. We have to work within the arrangements we have. As for instance, we have a 5-year planning cycle. That's what we're trying to do with our NAP also, a continuous process of how do you make use of existing institutional arrangements and all. And the other thing also, see, my department we're looking at is, again, it's a new way of thinking. I don't know what other panelists will agree or not. What we've been also telling the government is that when you look at the adaptation and all these institutional arrangements, let's not just see it as only a climate or a environment agenda. We need to link it to the broader goals of the overall see the economic agenda. We have a 2050 10x economic plan, which means the GDP has to increase by tenfold in the next 3 decades or so. And again, this is where the resilience, climate resilience and all play a big role in how the economy shapes up and all. So this is just some of the things where we are trying to integrate across entire activities in the economy, society, and in the government systems, as well as with the local government and private and civil society and academia. So Nami, this is okay. Thank you.
Harmonization is needed. It is not an easy task, from what we understand. Institutions matter. How the institutions raises to the occasion to sort of deliver is another question. Now I turn on to the same question, because these are 3 different national contexts. So I want to hear from Sri Lanka. How does it play out in Sri Lanka? What kind of structures they have? Are they adequate to sort of work on this?
Thank you, Nambi, and good morning to everyone. Esteemed panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I take this opportunity to appreciate organizers of this session for inviting me to share the views and experiences related on this global goal on adaptation. So in terms of capacities for developing national target based on this global target and also reporting. So what are the challenges I am going to share with you that first of all, let me allow me to elaborate that the governance structure and the coordination mechanism what we need, because you know that I'm not going to say that in Sri Lanka there is no any institutional arrangement already done, but that is also not very strong and in sufficient manner. In these circumstances, reporting and developing national adaptation targets based on GGA, because we know that we already prepared national global targets under the Kumin-Montiel global biodiversity framework target. So we know that how challenge we are facing. So therefore, I think the first of all, we need to relook at our clear mandate of national adaptation focal point and agencies, how that their mandates can be developed to meet that requirement. And also, as already indicated, that adaptation is very widespread in very cross-cutting sectors and cross-cutting areas. So therefore that cross-ministerial and also multi-sectoral coordination, vertical and horizontal coordination is required, because when we see the thematic areas of this GGA, it is not only limited to climate change. So there are non-climate change related thematic areas as well, like social and cultural, poverty, monitoring and evaluation. In this respect, I think we have to identify many other organizations as well to address these things. And also, as mentioned, that linking with the national and subnational level. In Sri Lanka, we have already developed our provincial adaptation plans for each provinces. We have 9 provinces in Sri Lanka. So that how that linking between this national adaptation plan and also the provincial adaptation plan. So such a planning, also I think at present it will be a challenging later on. And also this how that global goal adaptation can interlink with national adaptation plan as well as national determined contributions, and such challenges actually prevailing, and also that monitoring and evaluation and learning. So when we come to that, so there is again we have to engage, because you know that the capacities of human capacities of the country related to this reporting, especially under the UNFCCC, still we are in not the maximum requirement level. So, and also you know that if there is 100 indicators coming, so then the data collection, data portals, so many areas, so many indicators. So there, it is challenging, I think, in the future for a country like Sri Lanka, because we need a lot of institutional arrangement and coordination arrangements, and also other areas like establishing, as I mentioned, the methodology, metrics, and so many things, and also the human capacities and the institutional arrangement. So there are a big challenge ahead in terms of developing national adaptation targets based on GGA and also the reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaitunga. I forgot to introduce you. I'm very sorry. He's the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. He's one of a very unique bureaucrat with a very good science background, and he can understand these things far better than anybody. Thank you, Mr. Then moving on to Bangladesh, Mr. Kasi Shahjahan, Joint Secretary in Economic Relations Division, Ministry of Finance, Bangladesh, a seasoned bureaucrat with wide range of experience with various departments like Ministry of Labor, Energy, Planning and Budget, etc. And Bangladesh is a very unique sort of a country when it comes to adaptation. It has been a test bench for many years. Several experimentation has been done, and very successful incremental adaptations had happened over decades there. And there is a good, rich repository of knowledge also there. So I think how they deal with this is maybe anyway different from what other countries are doing, or how do you really see this? And also, I'm also curious to know if there are any new institutional arrangements are needed beyond the existing ones to carry forward the mandate of GGA. And how do you see you're equipped to handle this? Thank you.
Thank you, Nambi. Good morning to everybody. It's my pleasure and privilege to speak out on the behalf of Bangladesh, especially focusing on my division under Ministry of Finance. So I need to clarify what is my role in Bangladesh in regard to the financing. First one is the ERD, that means Economic Relations Division. First and foremost, our ministry, especially Economic Relations Division, is entrusted with the external resource mobilization. What is that? That means loan, grant, or aid. So we deal with this issue for the external resource mobilization in regard to the development process of my Bangladesh. So before starting to the answer of the Nambi's query, I need to focus on that. As a human being, what's our position? I would like to quote from Jack Rousseau, Social Contract. Man is born free, but everywhere he's in chain. So we are linked to a galaxy of rules and regulation, national and international level. So complying with the all regulations globally and nationally, what I should say, I should quote from the young voice of Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist and also political activist. So with the words of Greta Thunberg, she says, people can bring about a major positive transformation in society, even in the absence of full consensus. So we are in a position, the journey from Baku to Belem, now we are passing the transit time at Bangkok. So after this workshop or consultation, we'll go back to our country, then take preparation for facing the COP30. So in this scenario, what is the arrangements to the perspective of the global as well as my country? So it's not new what is assigned here to discuss. It was done previously back 2023, especially on the ECOSOC and General Assembly of UN. And there, some issues were discussed very critically. First one is that gap mitigation, that means recovering the better position of GGA. Second thing is that acceleration of the economic growth. Here, is economic growth must for an individual country? Back in the 90s, Bill Clinton said growth is merely stupid. Why? If the growth cannot be distributed properly, so huge gap will take place between inequality and equality. If we go through the text of Thomas Piketty in his very famous book, The Capital of the 21st Century. So Piketty says yes, and another book is Brief History of Equality. If equality cannot be ensured in the society, so whatever the indicator can be fixed up, that cannot be addressed properly. Same thing reiterated by Thomas Piketty in his book, The Brief History of Equality. So the capital of the 21st century and the journey from the inequality to equality, which is stipulated and reinforced by another developing economist, Joseph Stiglitz, in his book, The Price of Inequality. So what is the price of inequality? If the growth cannot be distributed properly to the people, so it may be the global perspective, it may be the country perspective, the system will collapse. So to the words of Huntington, the clash of civilization and remaking the world order. So what is the world order, the new world order? In this scenario, we need to talk about the country perspective, the institutional capacity is more or enough or all need to have. So in the global context, we can say yes, still there is the capacity gap among the countries, the SIDS, LDCs, and the mix. And this particularly resilience and vulnerability matrix, as stated by on 900 indicators. So it's really tough if you narrow down 100. So country context, it is difficult to recapitulate one after another, and this matrix actually, the crux of difficulties arise while compiling. And second thing is the fragmentation. So data often sits across ministries or divisions at the project-wise in the country level. It is also the fragmentation. So deviation from the main motto to extract. And huge debate between construction and deconstruction. So I can quote from the Jacques Derrida. So journey from the construction to deconstruction, from Derrida to Michel Foucault, so it's the language, it's the jargon. So in that perspective, institutional structure are extending the existing capacity. Yes, extend the existing capacity is the first and foremost target to be done. And second one, yes, aligning with international, especially GGA, we need to focus on that issue. And equity, yes, equity, justice. So equity, justice, equality, these are the jargon started from the dawn of the history, and still today we are looking forward. In Bangladesh context, yes, what we are planning, we have the global perspective, for example, Rio Trio, or the Kyoto Protocol, or the Paris Agreement. With this scenario, we have the country's perspective in our Constitution, Article 18A. It is stipulated, one, the needs of the conservation of our biodiversity and sustain it for the future generation. So we have the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. We have NAV 2023 to 2050. We have NDC 2 to 3. So we are going to submit the NDC 3 and the Bangladesh Development Prosperity Plan. We have the Delta Plan 2100. So it is covers the future. That means coming years to 2050 to 2100. So with this scenario, we have placed that $230 billion US dollar to implement the NAV. But every year we need to have the 8.5. But our Minister of Finance has allocated this year, financial year 2025 to 2026, only $4 billion. So the resource scarcity, that means 25 ministries are spending this money for the climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And our future plan is to navigate the grant money or the concessional loan to address this issue. So with this scenario, which I would like to focus on that, yes, we have so many challenges. Challenges of the regulation, challenges of the indicator identification and fixation among the ministry. Still, we have the hope to create something. For example, we can align the internal and external combination of fixing of the indication with our external resources and blending financing, and also some grants, though it's a huge challenge. I will talk to this issue in later on. So at this stage, what I should say, yes, we have the structural capacity, but we need to strengthen, integrate the coordination and cohesion. For example, Minister of Planning, and under the Minister of Planning, General Economic Division, and IMED, implementation, monitoring, evaluation. So that is the body entrusted to look into this issue. So existing mechanism is not enough. Further that, yes, if Minister of Finance or the lead ministry, Minister of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change can combine these issues, I hope to see, yes, we can do more to address the GGA issue in future. Thank you.
Thank you. You proved that you're a student of literature in many ways, and I saw your background as well, very philosophical. And certainly resource constraints are one of the biggest things which comes out, time and again when you talk about harmonizing these indicators. Let's move on to, we had a heavy dose of South Asia. Let's move to Korea, to Juyong Kang, and who has been a researcher, where it's a head of a researcher. She's from the Korean Institute of Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change, and she served as a program coordinator for UNEP National Committee for Republic of Korea. So I would like to hear your perspectives on this, particularly in terms of, how do we leverage the existing national frameworks and mechanics to minimize duplications, and also from the data collection point of view, existing data collection mechanisms, are they really sort of solutions for this particular context? If you could reflect a little bit on that, would be good. Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting question, Nambi. So my answer is clear that we should strengthen our existing mechanism, perhaps particularly the monitoring evaluation system of the National Adaptation Plans. Let me explain why using the Korea's cases as an example. Let me share my background first. So I'm from as you said, I'm from the Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change, and then it's called KSCCC. KSCCC is a national hub for the climate change adaptation in Korea, houses in the Korea Environment Institute. We oversee and support the entire adaptation policy cycle from the research and policy development to implementation and also monitoring evaluation. And then now let me tell you about the Korea's monitoring evaluation system for our NAP. The Korea has a 5 years rolling plan. We have a NAP called National Climate Change Adaptation Plan. Currently, we are implementing the enhanced version of the third NAP. And then starting from the third NAP, we established the comprehensive monitoring evaluation system. So we conduct the annual progress assessment to see how the implementation is going. And also we do the interim evaluation at the year 3 and the final evaluation at year 5. And then now here is the interesting part. We have been able to use this existing monitoring evaluation system for our national reports to the UNFCCC. Actually, I personally serve as a lead author for the Korea's first adaptation communication and also adaptation chapter of the Korea's first BTR. Our key success factor was that we built on our existing monitoring evaluation system. This annual progress report was really make a lot easier for us to develop our national reports to the UNFCCC. I personally believe that the reporting for the GGA indicator shouldn't be about producing another report. I mean, we have too many reports anyway. So we need to actually strengthen our adaptation policy and implementation on the ground. I know that the monitoring evaluation system of the NAB is not in place in many of the countries. Perhaps it might be more difficult to make it rather than just make a GGA reporting mechanism. But I know it's a very envious challenge. But anyway, we need the feedback loop of our NAB, which will make our reporting process help the country identify the gap and improve their policies, not just creating another report to sit on the shelf. Thank you very much.
Getting it, sorry. Now it's time to hear from the community perspectives. We have here Ms. Harjit Singh, who is the founding director at the Sampada Climate Foundation. Harjit Singh is an activist advocating for climate and social justice globally. Harjit also serves as a strategic advisor to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. Now, turning on to Ajit, what role do different levels of indicators, local, national, and global, play, and how can they be linked to ensure coherence? I want to get your thoughts, especially as a person who is connected to the grassroots, how one could socialize the indicators at the local level.
Thank you very much, Nambi, for this opportunity to speak at this very important session. Before I get into the details, let me just make some overarching comments about the indicators, and thank you so much, Teresa, for laying that out and sharing the process that we all have gone through, and for your commitment and patience to get us to where we are right now, and everybody who contributed. I think the important part is we need to make sure that ultimately we are not just monitoring the outputs, but the outcomes. And that we need to keep in mind, irrespective of what eventually gets agreed. But we need to make sure that we are looking at each indicator really helping us improve and enhance our adaptive capacity and making us resilient. And the best barometer of the success remains at the community level. However we measure what we have done at various levels, if communities are not safe, if we are not able to protect their livelihoods, their homes and infrastructure, that means we are absolutely failing. So the real world effectiveness is most important. My third point is about empowerment. When we talk about adaptive capacity, and especially when we are living in a world where temperatures continue to rise and disasters and climate impacts are increasing by the day, can we really develop solutions in boardrooms? Which means that all the solutions need to speak to that changing reality and whether communities are able to continuously adapt, because what is adaptation today is going to become maladaptation. So what is most important is communities having access to knowledge, information and resources so that they can develop their own adaptation plans, and that requires empowerment, which means empowerment has to be measured both as part of the process as well as the outcome. And the other point I would like to raise, and particularly listening to the statements from the governments of Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, that there is a bit of nervousness with these 100 indicators. Imagine from 9,500 to 100, but even this list of 100 is going to be quite overwhelming and sometimes intimidating for countries to report back. So it should not become a burden for developing countries, and I think, Teresa, you did briefly allude to that, how we are going to support. And that's where it's about the contextualization of these indicators. And thank you, Hugh, for saying that in Korea you are doing that. I think that's going to be extremely important to connect that with the current system. And my other broader point, which Mr. Shahjahan very rightly mentioned, that eventually it's about equity and justice. And it connects to the point when you say developing countries go to UNFCCC and participate in these global negotiations and processes to have access to finance, to have resources to implement. And it should not become a situation that these indicators become a burden and now they are being forced to report back when they are not getting adequate support to implement adaptation action. So I just wanted to mention those 5 points as overarching before I get into those some of the details. Now, when we talk about indicators, of course, each indicator at each level serves a very distinct and interconnected purpose. And we know that all are important to give us a complete picture. And especially when we talk about the local level, as I said earlier, it's about contextualizing, it's about being more specific and measuring. And that's where the qualitative indicators and the story-driven indicators are going to be extremely important when we speak to the community. Of course, we would like to measure that what percentage of households now have access to climate information, but that's not going to be enough. Unless and until we also measure, can a woman farmer in the village name 3 ways in which she has changed her planting schedule or practices, listening to a new radio program or the conversation she had with her peers, what change she now experienced, and we can see that happening in her practices. Of course, we would like to measure whether we have been able to successfully build seawalls, but is that enough? Not really. And that's where I was saying we need to go to the outcome and impact level. Are the mangroves planted last year are surviving? Are they helping communities to have the reduced impact of flooding, especially during high tides? So how do we really track the effectiveness of adaptation actions and how these actions are empowering communities to manage their own resources, develop their own solutions? I think that is going to be absolutely key. At the national level, again, we did hear from Dr. Jayatunga and Mr. Shahjahan that it's going to be important to look at how much resources have been allocated as part of the national budget, how much integration that has happened with the climate risk management plans, and how we have been able to secure and climate-proof our infrastructure. At the global level, of course, we are going to measure in terms of access to early warning systems, but I would like to emphasize particularly the financial flows, and that's going to be far more important for governments and communities. In terms of coherence, again, it has been touched upon, so I'll not go into a lot of details. I think it's about really the aggregation, what we are learning from the bottom-up processes, what impact we are actually going to see, and particularly looking at the qualitative evidence, and how we are going to match that with so-called top-down guidance so that we are able to get a full picture. Couple of points on socialization. Again, going back to this, the starting point has to be about people's reality. And unless and until we understand what people have been going through, what measures we have taken, involving communities and how they have been effective. So the questions that we need to be asking after implementing those actions, or when we are assessing climate impacts, is about talking to communities, saying, what does a good year look like in this village? What does a bad year look like? So asking those very simple questions and trying to understand when the floods came last year, what did they lose and what really helped them protect their homes and livelihoods and how they managed that. How they feel much more secure now and what has helped and what has not. So some of those questions, so basically translating those jargons into very lived experience of communities, whether they have been able to bounce back after a crisis. Do they have sufficient resources that they are now able to manage with the new challenges that they are facing, or they are still they still have to go and borrow more money and get stuck in this cycle of debt. Of course, we need to use a lot more visuals and oral methods, and many of us, and especially adaptation community, learning from the disaster management and risk reduction experiences, we have been using many participatory methodologies, whether it's climate or community scorecards, or using different kinds of smileys and beans, and also how we are now able to support communities to capture their experiences on their own, be it through oral stories or even using camera now. Mobile and cameras are available everywhere, how they can document those experiences. And again, storytelling is going to be extremely important. And my final point is the feedback loop. Of course, we do try to distill things, and we create those indicators, and we have our own ways of doing analysis, and academic rigor is absolutely important. But how do we really take that back to the communities and check whether the assessment that we are making is right or not? Really checking that, is that what we are seeing? Does it feel right? Does it match with your experience? So ultimately checking with the communities, because as I said earlier, that's going to be the barometer of success. We can talk about those 100 indicators, but ultimately whether communities are safe or not, whether they are more resilient or not, that's the billion-dollar question. Thank you.
Thank you, Harjit, for highlighting the importance of resources, empowerment, equity, and contextualization. I mean, these are very important. You spoke from your heart. This is somebody who is related to the community, working with the communities. It's right on target. And I now turn on to Jessica Turney. She's a Chief Climate Change Adaptation Unit, Chief of the Climate Change Adaptation Unit, a division of UNEP. Jessica has more than 20 years of experience in environment development policy and has worked on climate change adaptation programming in the UN for the past 11 years. My question to you, Jessica, is what is the role of the UN in the implementation of the global goal and adaptation, and what are the key entry points to provide support, either through ongoing efforts or through new programs? Maybe you could also supplement that with the, how to sort of inform the global stocktake process and facilitate these relations at the global level. What are the mechanisms in place, and how UNEP approaches this whole issue?
Thank you, Nambi. That's a very long question. I'll try to answer it as fully as I can. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this session, and thank you to the participants and the invitation to be part of the panel. So first of all, I want to say that I'm really pleased that finally we're putting an indicator framework against the global goal and adaptation. It's a huge step forward. What we can't measure, we can't manage, as you probably have heard before, so it's huge. It's not perfect, but it's a massive step forward. So in terms of how the UN can help countries, let me just say, first of all, that notwithstanding that I think it's a very important advance globally and for countries, to have this indicator framework, it is not going to be an easy thing to implement. It is going to require a lot of technical analysis and input into developing it, into reporting on it and contextualizing it at the country level. When you have a look at the 100 indicators, it's a mixed bag. Most are output focused, some are outcome focused. But let's look at the output focused ones. A lot of those will depend on national definitions. For example, this one here, adaptation plans implemented as part of an integrated water resources management plan. And when you look at the explanation, it talks about sustainable use and balancing water needs. That is hugely country specific. What does IWRM mean at the country level? Another one, informal settlements, upgrading programs that include climate change adaptation. So again, what does that mean at the country level to include climate change adaptation? And then for the outcome level indicators, some of them are going to require monitoring of the climate baseline. For example, how would you deem whether use of drinking water systems are climate resilient? You can only do that if you're monitoring the climate baseline. Other outcome level indicators are around establishing the current baseline. So for example, percentage of degraded land for food and agricultural development. And then others are very macro related, for example, change in the rate of reported heat-related injuries or death. And then, of course, in that change statistic, you would need to know what demographics are included in that change statistic. Are the most vulnerable populations seeing an improvement in that indicator? And so the distributional impacts at the macro level become very important. Now, why am I raising this? It's because I want to highlight to this room that it is not going to be an easy thing to implement. So in relation to the question around how the UN can help, we have many specialized agencies in the UN. We have food, we have health, we have settlements, my own agency, ecosystems. We have specialists that can help support governments, not just at the national level, but also at the subnational level, to develop these methodologies that make sense at the country level. The other thing is also that many of our agencies, mine included, are accredited to the International Climate Change Funds that provide key sources of support to advance on the GGA targets. And so I'm sure that many people in the room are aware of that. It's not just, the main one, of course, for this kind of work would be the Green Climate Fund Readiness Programme, but it's not just the Readiness Programme. Any source of support, whether it be from bilateral, whether it be from international sources, or indeed, even national sources, should be looking at policy, the policy environment enabling factors, because that offers the key pathway to scaling up. And so in all of that work, there would be scope to look at developing these methodologies and tailoring them to the country context. I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Now it has become a customary of all the panelists to respond to one rapid fire question. I was very ambitious, thinking that we'll have another round of questions, frame them as well, but in the interest of time, I don't think we could. Maybe we'll have open up for discussion about 2 or 3 questions later. Before that, I would like to go back to the panelists to ask, what is the one change that you would like to see in terms of supporting transformational adaptation? Who would bring this change? For a change, you could start from Jessica, working backwards. You could answer the question. What is the one change that you would like to see in terms of supporting transformational adaptation? Who would bring this change?
So the one thing that I would like to see is an enabling environment for adaptation. I've been responsible for programming adaptation with funding from the Least Developed Countries Fund and the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund for many, many years. And whilst these projects are really, really important in terms of showing how things can be done differently, we're not going to win this challenge project by project. It's simply too slow. There's simply not enough money. And so the only way that we're going to really, see transformation is if all sources of funding in the economy are building resilience rather than undermining it. So incentives, policy incentives, fiscal incentives, enforcement of regulations, none of this is new. But why isn't it happening? We've been talking about it for years and years. And I think my one conclusion from this is that we need really strong citizen movements to shift the needle. We need much more investment at the citizen level, awareness. We need, lots more awareness, lots of, there have been experiments with citizen budgeting fora, for example, in Brazil. We need much more of these really progressive governance arrangements scaled up and supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Now I turn on to Harjit to answer the same.
I think I've already said it. Let me repeat. I think we need a legal political mandate with adequately funded mechanism, particularly for the direct participation of communities and indigenous peoples in the design and monitoring of the projects. As I keep saying, they are the ones who are facing these realities. We need to give control in their hands to determine what kind of solutions are going to work for them. And we need a mandate that actually establishes their role in the entire process from planning to implementation to monitoring. And of course, financial resources are going to be absolutely must. Thank you.
Thank you. Yuan?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I've been in this adaptation field for past 15 years, and although the Korea has a really, really good system in terms of the National Adaptation Plan and everything, but I sometimes still feel frustrated. I know my question is a very provoking statement, but I've been thinking about this question in context of the Korean society. I think we need to reconsider fundamentally our default assumption about the risk. Yesterday, the Youssef mentioned about this point that we need to think about the default assumption about the risk. We need to think about this assumption that all climate risk can be reduced to zero. And actually, the question remains to me is that what level of the climate risk we are willing to accept as a new normal in the Korean society. This requires maybe the society-wide conversation. We need to collectively decide what acceptable risk is in the new climate reality, and we need to raise awareness about the Korean people about the living with some level of risk. This is my frank answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you please repeat your question?
What is the one change that you'd like to see in terms of supporting the transformation practice?
Okay, thank you very much, Nambi. It's really tough to be the change maker, because when one wants to be change maker, he has become already changed. Once again, I go back to the words of Greta Thunberg. What is that? She says, the climate crisis has already been solved. We already have facts and solution. All we have to do is to wake up and change. So change is only unchanged scenario, not only in the country perspective, but also global perspective, because new theories are coming ahead and we are going to solve it. So from the journey to Adam Smith to Abhijit Banerjee, the core heart of the economics, and after 100 years of Adam Smith, Karl Marx said, yes, everything is behind the economics. So economics, it may be macro or macro level, that is the best issue to solve the problem. So if you see the scenario, back 70s, Asian drama. So what is the Asian drama is staged? And after the early 90s, you see the Poverty and Famine by Amartya Sen. And even early 20s, the first decades of the 21st century, you see development as a freedom. Still, development is seen to the extent of the context of the freedom. Has the LDCs or the MIGs or the SIDs giving the development to frame or to coin any issue aligning with the international target? Because we are the less polluted, but we are facing the huge impact in regard to the pollution of the climate sense, whatever you have coined. So whatever is stated by the Abhijit Banerjee, that is called Poor Economics for the Hard Time. And very latest book, you say what economics needs now to the context of the India, but partially connected with Bangladesh. And later on, you see very recent, our interim government chief advisor, Dr. Yunus, in his very famous book, 3.0, the poverty, then unemployment, and zero net carbon. So with this scenario, what one chance we can do, so yes, our country perspective as we're heading towards the LDC graduation, we entered 1975, then fulfilled the criteria 2018, then review 2021-24. Now we are at a tussle to review it or not. So huge issue are coming to the economic factors by which as a government or civil servant, it's really tough. But from our perspective, we need to focus on that innovating funding or self-sufficiency in regard to the policy formulation, implementation, coordination, and cohesion. Obviously, if we want to do so, we need to have the cooperation from the regional cooperation, national cooperation, and international, especially the UNF or UN, like that thing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mr. Jaitanga.
Yeah, in order to build the resilience to meet the adverse impact of climate change, so that responsibility should take by, I think I'm going to say that it's a collective effort. So individually, one country cannot do that, the resilience of the earth. So therefore, collective effort of developed countries, so Annex 1 countries, non-Annex 1 parties, because they are the most vulnerable, and also the development partners should support, because this vulnerability is not because of us. So therefore, I think the transformational change should be taken by all of us together, international, national, subnational, and also the community level, to meet this GGA, as well as to build resilience of all the communities of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saram, I will also sort of, after responding to this, if you could spend a couple of minutes on giving a summary of the GGA conference you had, maybe very quickly, very briefly in Bhutan. What are the key takeaways, one or two messages from there? It will help this audience and the panelists to sort of, get a grasp of it. Thank you.
Okay, so on that enabler, the rapid thing, I think when we've been all discussing, right, we need to all work together, we need to reform institutions. But let's look at, I think, a key change that we have to make is, even when you look at the existing, I mean, we've heard from other panelists saying that, we have to go to the grassroots, adaptation output must be at the grassroots and all. But I would like to highlight some things, institutional rigidity that we need to reform, right, both as governments and as in the international multilateral level. Look at the climate funds. I mean, try applying for it, I mean, forget about communities getting the funds directly with the impact. I mean, even governments, we face trouble, I mean, these are designed either to create more jobs for consultants or for agencies, and also we need to reform that, and every year in COP, you hear all of us complaining to the funds, but we don't see those things happening. So first and foremost, we have to really reform existing structures and all, both at the national and international level, to really support GGA. And then on the GGA workshop in Bhutan, I think that kind of set the stage for this outcome that we now see. That workshop was interesting because it went off to a very rocky start. I mean, parties and groups broke into positions. The chair had to request that, this is a technical dialogue. This is not political positioning. This is not the COP negotiations and all. So I think that one of the key outcomes was that And that subset chair, I mean, he was good. I mean, he really made it clear, because otherwise we were stuck for half a day where everyone started taking positions also. I mean, I won't get into technicalities that I think Therese and group are much better, and I don't want to kind of expropriate their work and what they've done, but that really set the stage, you know, to remove the politics out of the GGA discussion indicators and all. That let's really focus on the technicalities. Let's focus on the merit of what really should be the indicators. I mean, can you remove politics totally out? I don't think so, you know, because there's always that push and pull. But I would say this is one of the key outcomes of one that really focus on the technicalities of the work. And the second outcome, I would say, from that workshop again is that it really it highlighted also the you know, the what we've heard from everyone here, right? The while we may have a global framework, but also we have to take into national and subnational of realities and contexts in mind, and which, and I think especially I can't pronounce his, I forgot his name. Harjit had really eloquently mentioned, you know, that the true success of all this will be really what happens on the ground, and that was what in the workshop, in the first GGA workshop after Dubai, that I would say these were the two some of the two key takeaways that emerged out of that workshop. Yeah, thank you.
All wise words have been said. You know, it's really brilliant. Very rich discussions we had. Of course, the panelists have provided useful pointers and effectively streamline GGA processes at the national level. It's not without challenges, as we have clearly they have expressed that in different words. We hope there is a global consensus on the proposed indicators at the Belém COP, and we move swiftly to operationalize GGA to achieve the transformative goals. You know, this is something, and I also, the Babu and company have really eased the moderator's job. You know, they have wonderful communication tools. You know, it is on exhibit now. You could see the summary is there, very nicely portrayed there. You know, we will definitely. I have certain key messages as well. I'll sit with them to see if there are any missing links there, and we could further kind of, you know, polish that. Truly, I just wanted to open up discussions, but we are running very tight on time. There is also a small another event here, you know, as part of this. There is the UNDP regional office is going to release a document on adaptation financial strategy guidelines, and that will happen after the vote of thanks from Uzumi from IGES. Yeah.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. It's honor for me to deliver the vote of thanks for this insightful and timely session on global goal on adaptation. On behalf of all the esteemed participants and in the spirit of this forum, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who contributed to the depth and success of this discussion. First and foremost, our sincere thanks go to our moderator, Nambi Appadurai, for his skillful guidance and for expertly navigating the complex interlinkages we discussed today. We are profoundly grateful to our speaker, Teresa Wong, for setting the scene with a comprehensive presentation on the global goal on adaptation and the crucial process to achieve its indicators. Her input provides an essential foundation for our discussion. Our appreciation extends to our distinguished panel members from Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, as well as to our experts from KEI Korea, the Satat Sampada Climate Foundation India, and UNEP. We thank Sonam Tash, Sunimal Jayatunga, Kaji Shahjihan, Joyong Khan, Harjet Singh, and Jessica Troni for sharing your insights and practical challenges. We also thank the panelists for providing a quick response to the final Q&A short session. To briefly summarize the core value of this session, we must first recognize the foundational shift the GGA represents. The establishment of this global goal underscores a vital truth. Adaptation is no longer a localized challenge, but a shared global undertaking that demands collective action and cooperation. This is a foundational spirit that must anchor all our efforts to enhance international cooperation, including supporting the most vulnerable in addressing complex or transboundary climate change impacts. The key takeaway from today is clear. The path to achieving the global goal on adaptation requires a dedicated efforts to align, strengthen, and leverage our existing national system to track meaningful progress. And we need to give due attention to the local communities, enabling environment, and other social objectives, among others. In this context, we must also be mindful of the COP process. While we have discussed the technical elements, we must be aware that the final consensus-based framework for the GGA indicators is scheduled for agreement at COP30 this year. This realization should galvanize us all. Our collective task now is to ensure this decision delivers a truly pragmatic and beneficial guiding light for adaptation efforts worldwide. Finally, our deepest gratitude goes to each and every one of this room for your passionate participation. As we look ahead, we must ensure our adaptation solutions are reaching scale and fast enough to make an impact. Your presence here today is a powerful demonstration of our collective efforts to reach that landing zone of making communities resilient for all. Thank you once again to all the speakers and panelists for sharing your expertise, and to all of you for making this session such a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mizuno. I give back the stage to Babu to conduct the next proceedings. I also request the participants to stay here for a few minutes for the release event. Mr. Hazard, over to you. Babu, you're on.
Yeah, I was about to invite Asad Bhai, so please, Asad Bhai, come, and then I will come after him.
A very good morning, and thanks to Babu Bhai and also the APAN Secretariat for providing UNDP with the opportunity to share this adaptation financing strategy guide that we have been working on for the last 1 year. And this, I mean, of course, builds on the rich discussion that we have just heard, and I mean, we have been talking to different countries as well, to the different development partners on the needs for financing. So, I mean, amidst the political challenges, the financing challenges, the need to engage the citizens, we wanted to come up with a coherent approach on how to go and proceed on the implementation of the NAPs. And we know that 64 NAPs, 64 countries have developed their NAPs. But the next challenge is how to finance those national adaptation plans. And it's not prescriptive. It's indicative what countries can consider during the development of the financing strategy to implement the NAP. So that's the first thing, and you will see there are 4 phases of the guide. But it doesn't mean that, I mean, it's every step has to be followed in the way it has been laid out in the guide. What we are trying to suggest is that different countries are at different stages in terms of data availability, in terms of the adaptation plans, in terms of the public financial management, development, the integration of climate into the systems. So countries can take different approaches based on where they are in terms of the climate change journey, in terms of their governance and institutional structure. Now, we also know that, I mean, there are different products and different guidance. So, we have rather complemented instead of creating a parallel guide. So the IIST principles that they have for the adaptation financing strategy, the ADB investment framework, the NDCP investment framework. So this is a slightly more comprehensive guide that, I mean, takes into consideration the investments need, the financing options, and then also how to match the financing options with the needs. The QR code is there, so the executive summary is already there. So you can basically look at the executive summary, and the full document will be released towards the third week of October. Also to say that, I mean, while you can take a full comprehensive financing, develop a full financing strategy for the entire NAP, but if you want to consider some sectors, or you want to do it at the subnational level or the national level, I mean, there is provision for that, and there are different business models that you can adopt for different sectors. So thank you very much for providing the opportunity, and we are available, and of course, I mean, with the sister UN agencies, with the other development partners. We have Christina, Julie, I mean, from the UNDP team, and we'll be very happy to support countries on the implementation, because, I mean, that's what we have to do at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let us give another round of applause to the moderator and all the panel members, please. And please, panel members, stay in the podium, and I'm requesting our photographer to come, and we'll take a group photo. While our photographer will come here for the group photo, I'd like to also mention that the morning coffee is going to be served in front of the SCAP hall. So if you have any friends who are actually on the first level, please tell them the coffee is on this floor. I also would like to request all the technical sessions leader, please provide your key messages in the Google Drive that we have created. Unless we have your inputs, it would be really hard for us to present the summary tomorrow. But also it was not our plan, let me put in that way, but I would like to thank my colleagues working very hard in the APAN Secretariat, plus the partners who are providing inputs. And as I mentioned, it was not in our plan, but we have started sending kind of a daily summary. So if we get more inputs from you, it will be more richer in terms of the daily summary to go out to about 7,000 individuals. So that's another thing that I would like to request all the technical session leaders. We know that today we'll have 15 technical sessions, so please help us on that. So can I get the photographer to come forward for the group photo, please? And the audience, if you come stands, please. So I think it would be good if you stand in front of that. Then it's going to be very good. Thank you once again, and looking forward to having that conversation in the technical session, which will start at 11.